I was maybe 10 when I first saw it tucked away in the dusty attic of my grandmother's house. A Victorian dollhouse, intricately detailed, almost unsettlingly lifelike. Grandma always told me, "Don't touch the dollhouse, Daniel." No explanation, just that stern warning. It made me obsessed. The tiny furniture, the miniature portraits on the walls, even the dust that seemed to cling to it like a second skin. It drew me in. I'd sneak up to the attic, heart hammering, just to stare at it. One afternoon, Grandma went out. Curiosity finally won. I snuck into the attic, the air thick with the smell of old wood and decay. My hand trembled as I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface of the dollhouse. Nothing happened. I opened the tiny front door, peering inside. The miniature rooms were eerily perfect, right down to the tiny, unblinking eyes of the doll family sitting around the dining table. I felt a chill, a prickle of unease, like something was watching me. I started playing with the dollhouse, rearranging the furniture, moving the little dolls. It was strangely absorbing. I lost track of time, the real world fading away as I became immersed in this miniature world. I even started talking to the dolls, making up stories, giving them voices. It felt natural, almost as if they were listening. And that's when things started to change. Small things at first. A flickering light in the real house, a floorboard creaking when no one was there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the dollhouse in my mind, the tiny, frozen faces of the dolls staring back at me. I heard noises coming from the attic, faint scratching sounds like tiny footsteps. I told myself it was just the old house settling, but a cold dread seeped into my bones. Something was wrong, very wrong. I pulled the covers over my head, trying to block out the unsettling feeling, but it was no use. The next morning, Grandma noticed. She saw the dollhouse, its door slightly ajar, a chair overturned inside. Her face went white. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You touched it." I tried to explain, to tell her I was just playing, but she cut me off. "You don't understand," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "You've awakened something." Strange things started happening more frequently. Objects moving on their own, whispers in the empty hallways, the feeling of being watched, always watched. Grandma became withdrawn, spending most of her time in the attic, muttering to herself. I tried to avoid the attic, but I could still feel its presence, a dark, heavy weight pressing down on me. One evening, I heard Grandma screaming. I rushed to the attic, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was open, and a strange, sickly, sweet smell hung in the air. Grandma was slumped against the wall, her eyes wide with terror, pointing a trembling finger at the dollhouse. The tiny dolls were gone. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. Tiny, unseen presences moving around me. I backed away slowly, a cold dread washing over me. I ran from the attic, slamming the door behind me, but I knew it was too late. Whatever Grandma had awakened, it was loose in the house, and it wasn't going back. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my room, every creak of the house sending shivers down my spine. I heard whispers outside my door, tiny voices chanting my name. I knew they were the dolls, the miniature figures from the dollhouse, now somehow alive and malevolent. The next morning, Grandma was gone, vanished without a trace. The only sign of her was the attic door, still slightly ajar, and the empty dollhouse, waiting patiently in the center of the room. The tiny, empty chairs seemed to mock me. I never touched the dollhouse again. I left the house soon after, unable to bear the weight of its presence, the constant feeling of being watched, the echoes of tiny footsteps in the empty halls. Years passed, but the memory of the dollhouse never faded. I tried to convince myself it was all in my imagination, a child's overactive fantasy. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something lived in that dollhouse, something ancient and malevolent, and I had awakened it. Recently, I inherited the house. I hadn't been back in years, but now it was mine. I knew I should sell it, tear it down, anything to get rid of it. But something compelled me to go back, to face the source of my childhood nightmares. I walked up to the attic, the air thick with the familiar smell of dust and decay. The dollhouse sat there, waiting. I reached out, my hand hovering over the tiny front door. The same chilling feeling washed over me, the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes upon me. And then I saw them, not in the dollhouse, but reflected in its tiny windows. Tiny figures standing behind me, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes black and empty. They weren't dolls, they were me, reflected over and over, shrinking into infinity, trapped within the miniature world of the dollhouse, waiting. I found it in a dusty box at a flea market, labeled simply 66. A film reel, old and brittle, like something out of a forgotten era. The vendor swore he didn't know what was on it, just that he'd found it tucked away in his grandfather's attic. I'm a sucker for these kinds of things, the mystery, the unknown. I paid him a few bucks, a thrill of anticipation buzzing in my chest. I rushed home, eager to see what secrets this reel held. The projector whirred to life, casting a flickering light on my living room wall. The first few frames were blurry, static. Then an image began to form. A grainy black and white scene of a forest, a group of people, maybe teenagers, laughing and joking. They were hiking, their faces full of carefree joy. A sense of unease settled over me. Something felt off, like watching a home movie from a ghost town. The air in the room felt colder, heavier. They came across a clearing. In the center, a stone well, ancient-looking, covered in moss. One of the teens, a girl with long dark hair, approached it. She peered over the edge, her laughter echoing in the unsettling silence of the woods. Then she screamed, not a playful scream, but one of pure terror. The film flickered violently, the image distorting for a moment. My heart pounded in my chest. I had a growing sense of dread. When the image cleared, the girl was gone. The others were panicking, calling her name. Their voices sounded distorted, almost inhuman. The camera, held by one of the teenagers, shook violently, capturing their frantic search. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees like grasping claws. The air in my living room grew colder still. I shivered, pulling a blanket around me. This wasn't just a film, it felt like a warning. One by one, they began to vanish. Swallowed by the shadows, their screams cut short. The camera fell to the ground, pointing towards the well. The last thing I saw before the film cut to static was a dark, swirling shape rising from its depths. It looked hungry. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. This well, it was like a gateway to something evil, something ancient and malevolent. I fumbled for the projector, my hands shaking. I had to turn it off. I had to stop watching. But something held me back. A morbid curiosity, a need to understand what I had just witnessed. I rewound the film, my breath catching in my throat. I watched it again, this time focusing on the background. I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a symbol carved into the stones of the well. It was a spiral, intricately detailed, almost hypnotic. It looked familiar, like something I'd seen in a book somewhere, a symbol of ancient power, or perhaps a curse. I paused the film, the image of the spiral burned into my mind. I grabbed my laptop, frantically searching for the symbol. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in variations of spiral symbol, ancient symbols, cursed symbols. The results were unsettling. The spiral was associated with ancient cults, rituals involving sacrifice, and gateways to other dimensions. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just some creepy film, it was a record of a real event, a ritual gone wrong. And that well, it was still out there, somewhere. A sudden chill swept through the room. I looked up, my heart pounding in my chest. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I felt a presence in the room, a cold, watchful gaze. I wasn't alone. I grabbed the film reel, intending to destroy it, to erase this cursed object from existence. But as I held it in my hand, I felt a strange pull, a compulsion to watch it again, to see the horror unfold one more time. I placed the reel back on the projector, my hands trembling. The whirring sound filled the room like a death knell. The image flickered back to life, the grainy black and white footage of the forest appearing on the wall. The footage played out as before, the teenagers' laughter echoing through my living room. But this time, something was different. At the edge of the frame, just barely visible, was a figure. Tall, cloaked, and watching. It hadn't been there before. It was me. I gasped, stumbling back. How could that be? How could I be in the footage? The camera panned towards the well, and the cloaked figure stepped into view. The face beneath the hood was obscured by shadow, but I knew it was me, but older, my future self. The film cut to static, the projector whirred to a halt. I stood there, frozen in terror, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I wasn't just watching the film, I was part of it. The well, the spiral, it was calling to me, and I knew with chilling certainty that I would answer. I never wanted the house, not really. Old Victorian monstrosities weren't my style, but when my great-aunt Millie passed, leaving me her beloved estate, I couldn't refuse. It felt wrong, like turning my back on family. Stupid, I know. The lawyer's voice echoed in my head, something about a complicated history, but I brushed it off. Free house, right? What could go wrong? I pulled up to the place, the wrought iron gates groaning like tortured souls. The inside was worse. Dust lay thick, clinging to everything like a shroud. The air felt heavy, stale, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. Millie had been a collector. Strange artifacts lined the shelves, grotesque carvings and unsettling portraits. I felt eyes on me, even though I was alone. A chill crawled up my spine, settling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the cold. It felt like observation, like something was studying me, weighing me up. I forced myself to go downstairs. The hallway was bathed in an unnatural, pale light. It wasn't moonlight. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The gong hung in the foyer, silent and still. I reached out to touch it and recoiled as a wave of cold washed over me. It felt wrong, unnatural. I backed away slowly, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that something was terribly wrong with this house. I started researching Millie's collection. Old newspaper clippings, dusty journals, and whispered local legends painted a disturbing picture. The artifacts weren't just decorations. They were focal points, conduits, each one tied to a specific tragedy, a dark event in the town's history. The gong apparently was used in some sort of ritual, a ritual meant to appease something. My stomach churned. I had inherited more than just a house. I had inherited a haunting. The whispers started subtly, faint murmurs at the edge of my hearing, just enough to make me question my sanity. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes, shadows that darted away when I turned to look. Then the dreams began. Vivid, terrifying nightmares filled with distorted faces and whispering voices. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I was unraveling. The house was getting inside my head. One night, I woke to find myself standing by the gong. I didn't remember getting out of bed. My hand rested on the cold metal, drawn to it like a magnet. The whispering was louder now, urging me, compelling me. I tried to pull my hand away, but it felt stuck, frozen to the surface. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, guttural voice. It spoke my name. I snapped out of it, yanking my hand away as if burned. The voice faded, the whispers receding into the background noise of the house. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I had to get out. I had to leave. I packed a bag, throwing clothes in haphazardly, my hands shaking. I had to escape before the house consumed me. As I reached the front door, the whispers intensified, laced with a chilling urgency. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. The front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the silent house. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The house didn't want me to leave. I turned back to the hallway, my breath catching in my throat. Standing at the end of the hall, bathed in the same unnatural light as before, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, and shrouded in shadows. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze, cold and piercing. I knew with a sickening certainty that this was what Millie had been trying to appease. The figure started to glide towards me, silent as a ghost. The whispers intensified, the voice returning, stronger than before. It spoke my name again, and this time it sounded welcoming, like it was greeting an old friend. Terror seized me, paralyzing me in place. I couldn't scream, couldn't run. I could only watch as the figure drew closer. As the figure reached me, the whispers filled my head, drowning out all other thought. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world tilted, the hallway blurring and twisting around me. The voice whispered in my ear, close and intimate, "Welcome home." I woke up in bed. Sunlight streamed through the window and the house was silent. For a moment I thought it had all been a nightmare, a terrible, vivid dream. Then I saw it. On the bedside table next to my phone lay a small, ornate gong, identical to the one in the foyer but miniature. I reached out to touch it, and a wave of icy cold washed over me. I heard the front door creak open downstairs. Footsteps echoed through the house, slow and deliberate. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was no longer alone. The house had claimed me, and now it was time to start my collection. I heard a faint metallic clang from downstairs, the sound of the large gong, and then silence, my silence. I inherited my grandfather's antique shop, a dusty, dimly lit place crammed with forgotten relics. He was a strange man, always whispering about the stories objects held. I never took him seriously until now. It started with a music box, intricately carved, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Its melody was haunting, unsettling, yet I couldn't stop winding it. That night, the nightmares began. Vivid dreams of a shadowy realm, a kingdom of eternal night. The second night, the dreams shifted. I was no longer an observer, but a participant, trapped in that oppressive kingdom. Tall, shadowy figures surrounded me, their whispers echoing in my ears. I couldn't understand their language, but the malice was clear. I woke up in a cold sweat, the music box's melody still ringing in my ears, even though it wasn't playing. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. The air in the shop felt colder, heavier. I tried to sell the music box, to get it out of my life. But every potential buyer would recoil, clutching their heads, muttering about an unbearable chill. One woman screamed, claiming she saw shadowy figures swirling around it. I began to isolate myself, terrified of the dreams, terrified of the music box, terrified of what was happening to me. I researched the music box, poring over my grandfather's journals. He'd written about a cursed collection, items imbued with the darkness of that other realm. He'd warned against disturbing them, against opening the door to the kingdom of eternal night. He'd written about the music box specifically, calling it the key. My blood ran cold. I had unlocked something terrible. The dreams intensified, bleeding into my waking hours. I'd see fleeting shadows in the periphery, hear whispers in the silence. The shop felt different now, pulsating with a dark energy. Objects seemed to shift on their own, their surfaces rippling like water. The line between reality and the nightmare kingdom was blurring. I was losing myself. One night I saw them, not in a dream, but standing in my shop. The tall, shadowy figures from the nightmare, their eyes burning with an unholy light. They reached for me, their whispers turning into guttural growls. I knew with chilling certainty that they were here to drag me into their kingdom. I grabbed the music box, desperate to silence the melody that had started this nightmare. But as my fingers brushed against the cold metal, the figures lunged. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the growing darkness. I woke up on the floor of the shop, the music box clutched in my hand. The figures were gone, but the shop was colder, darker than ever. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, and the silence was deafening. I knew I couldn't stay there. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. It was like an invisible force was holding it shut. The windows were sealed tight, the glass unbreakable. I was trapped in the gateway to the kingdom of eternal night. Then I saw it, my reflection in the tarnished mirror behind the counter. It wasn't me. My eyes glowed with the same unholy light as the shadowy figures. My skin was pale, almost translucent, and behind me in the reflection I saw them. They were always there. I could feel myself changing, becoming one of them. The music box's melody filled the shop, no longer haunting, but welcoming. It was calling me home to the kingdom of eternal night. I reached out, my hand phasing through the mirror into the reflection. The shadowy figures smiled, their glowing eyes fixed on me. I was almost home. The last thing I saw, before the darkness consumed me completely, was my grandfather's journal lying open on the counter. He'd written a final entry, just a few words scrawled in a shaky hand. The kingdom takes its due. There is no escape. The shop stands empty now, gathering dust. The music box sits silently on the counter, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to unlock the door to the kingdom of eternal night. And sometimes, late at night, if you listen closely, you can hear a faint melody drifting from within, the haunting tune of a music box calling you home.